Hey everybody, welcome back to IEEE's AutoCAD series. I'm going to be your host again, Lucas Saber, and I'm going to help you continue learning how to use AutoCAD so you can use it for any engineering purposes that you might need. Or, personal, doesn't really matter. So, last video we went through a bunch of the draw tools on how to draw a bunch of things in AutoCAD and get kind of familiar with how all those tools worked and everything. This video, we're going to go to the tab adjacent to that, which we'll see in a minute, and that's called the Modify tab, which you can basically take all the things that you've already made with the draw tools, all the like fundamental line shapes and everything, and how you can combine them, use them, utilize them, change them, and effectively modify them to however you need to. And then with after that, we'll basically jump into how we can make drawings and how we can, approach those and do it in a really good way that'll be efficient for the time that you're putting towards that. So I'm going to open up my file here and get my workspace all set up. We're going to start, like I said, in the Modify tab. Up here in the upper left corner, under the Home ribbon, next to Draw, we're going to have Modify. So obviously, use Draw to make all of the main components you're going to use, and use Modify to edit them. And when you can make base parts and edit other parts, you can pretty much do whatever you want from there as far as the drawings themselves go. And then I'll show you a couple extra things that are super helpful to know. So the first thing we're going to explore is this Move tool. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to make just something that we can work with to start with. And then we'll move that. So I won't do anything too crazy, but let's just kind of make something. Doesn't really matter what it is. So we will make that. Maybe take a line. Maybe do this. Put this line there. And we'll make like another circle there. We'll do something like that. So I'm just going to do this video a bit different than the other one. I'm not going to have everything all labeled. It's going to be a bit more just constructive from each tool. You can kind of use the same stuff to use the other tools and to just expand off of one type of drawing instead of making like a bunch of different weird drawings. So the first thing I'm going to show you is called the Move tool. So this one is pretty interesting. It's not super interesting, but it's useful. It's definitely useful to know. So as it would imply, you can move stuff around. Well, let's say you have a single thing like a circle, right? Why would you not just click it and then move it around like this? Well, for single objects, that's actually like probably the easiest, fastest way to do it. But if you have like, let's say something else here, or dang, I don't know, maybe a rectangle too. It doesn't really matter. But if you were to select all these now, you can't really like move them all independently. Or, well, you can actually, my bad. You can't move them as a unit. Well, Move solves that problem. So let's get rid of these. So for example, let's say I want to take this whole thing and I just want to move it up here. Okay, well, like most of these tools, it'll kind of walk you through it. So I'll start doing that. So it tells me to select the objects that I want to move, right? So I'll select the objects here. You can do that by clicking and holding and drawing an area, or you can just single click and drag. It depends. The organic one where you click, hold, and drag, that's for like more specific, more complicated drawings. But whichever one you are comfortable with will be perfectly fine. So then you can click enter, or you can right click and it will be like an enter, so to speak. So I just did that. Specify base point. Well, in order to move this, what you're going to do is you're basically going to click a point and you're basically going to draw a line. The same way you draw a line where you have polar coordinates, you have a length and an angle. So we're going to do that, and it's going to draw a length between the previous version and then the new version where you're going to move it to. So let's say I want to move it up here. I'll click the center, and I'll move it right up here just like that. Well, let's say I want it to be perfectly up here. I can either hold snap, but let's say, sorry, what I meant by that is I can hold it on the snap and drag it. My bad. So I'm going to put it over here, right? Let's say I want to have it at exactly 55 degrees. So I will click tab and it will go over to here, put in 55. And this is something super useful. If you want it to be exactly at 55, you'll notice on that side piece there that it's got a little lock on it. That lock is helpful because now it's locked at 55 degrees. You can go back and change it, but once you've entered one and you go to a different section, or you go to, for example, the length, now that's constant. It's kind of held in place, so you don't have to worry about it moving all over the place. So we'll do 55, and then I'm not really going to be particular about the length, so I'll just click it. So we have just moved, and there's nothing else super crazy about that. It's just the ability to move multiple things with a reference point. One of the great things about AutoCAD is that it's based on reference geometry, where you can make a bunch of shapes and geometry, but you can also reference that to make other things. So that's super useful. Okay, so let's say now we're going to go to rotate here. So what does that involve? Well, as it would imply, you rotate something about to center. So let's have it walk us through it. Select the objects we want to rotate. Easy enough. Right click. Then we're going to do specify base point. So I want to go around the center here, so we'll do that. But you can click anywhere on here. It doesn't matter. You can have it snap to places. Like that's a quadrant snap. That's an intersection snap. It's a node snap, and this is a node snap. If you want to know what snap specifically you're dealing with, what you can do is you can either click this, which was the snap settings. We went over that the last video. You can either go here and see all the little symbols. You can go to object snap settings and it'll tell you what you have, like what each one means. Or honestly, this is something actually really interesting I found out. You can just kind of hover over it and it'll tell you like that's an endpoint. That's a quadrant. Well, that one's not telling me now. But yeah, it can tell you what they mean, which is actually super awesome. I think if I do this, yeah, there's a midpoint one here. Anyway, back to rotate. So we're going to click our center point and then it's going to want to rotate. Well, I would assume most of you guys know trig. I would really hope so. But basically, it's going to, the circle involved, one of the reasons I did a circle here is because it starts with like the unit circle degrees. So 0 degrees is going to start here. And you'll see it says 0 degrees. That's going to be 90. It's going to be 180. It's going to be 270. Back to 0 again. So let's say I just want to get it over here. Honestly, no. Let's go down this way. So I could do 270 degrees. Or I could do negative 90 degrees. It's just you want to go from what angle you want to do. So I'm going to put in negative 90. Now, a brief note before I do this. Actually, no. I'll do negative 90. Perfect. But I want to show you something else really cool. I want to repeat this. So I'm going to right click here. And I'm going to do repeat rotate. You can also find recent commands you've used, and that's really helpful to get to them. But if you do repeat rotate, specify the base here. I want to rotate it. Some of the things that most of these tools have that's really awesome is they have extra features that you can access. Not all of them are super important, but it's really nice to know that they're there if you do need them. So you can either right click and anything between these two bars, between this one and anything else, that'll be them. Or you can down arrow on the keyboard and see exactly what it is. So in this case, you can have a number, you can have an integer, you can copy, or you can use reference. Reference just means you can use reference geometry by clicking somewhere with the mouse. That's a specific angle. And copy just means that when you rotate, you're going to keep the original. So I'll show you if I were to copy this way, it will keep the copy. Go ahead and make sure you save quickly. Control S would be the shortcut for that in case you don't know. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go to trim. So that's this command up here. So if you were to click this, What will it do? I wonder. You select the items that you want to trim from. Well, I'm going to select all of this so we have all of it available to us, but when you select items for trim, it basically gives you a bunch of reference geometry that the program can use to figure out if there is a line or a segment or something in between a bounded section. So for instance, if I wanted to get rid of this and trim this away, it understands that this arc is bounded between this line and this circle. So if I click trim, it'll trim that. And I had to trim it twice here because I actually just like copied everything and it was overlapping. But so I can do that. Trim this. Trim those two. Oh, but there's a little down arrow. So what can that do for us? What's faster is right clicking. So you can see you have fence, crossing, project, edge, erase, and all that. They're not really super important to use. You can definitely use them. I'm not going to go into those though, because honestly for trim you don't need them. So we have our stuff here. We'll just right click. You can find enter in the right click menu as well. So we'll click that, enter. You can also just click enter on your keyboard, but in case you don't want to move your hand all over your keyboard, that will definitely save you a bit of time. Okay, so that's pretty much the biggest part of trim here, but you see there's a little arrow down here. A little up here, I guess. Then in this menu, it'll have options because a lot of these tools you can see fillet, array. See under the draw menu for this one, there's a little arrow. That means that there's more options that are related to the same thing. So this one is extend. It'll take a segment and it'll extend it to the next bounding area. So let's give it the input of all this stuff. Right click or press enter, and you can extend stuff. So it'll extend that there. Extend this. You can extend a curve to the next bounded region. All that's awesome. But there's actually, I'll do this one for this one here. You can see there are some options. Same thing as the other one. It's just extending or trimming. But there's actually a really cool thing if you noticed it earlier. If you go to trim and you go to trim items, let's say you right click now. Now it'll say or shift select to extend. So if you hold the shift button, instead of trimming, it'll actually extend. So you can just go to trim and basically have both tools available to you if you just press shift. Super helpful to know that. Makes things a bit quicker. So let's just extend this and we'll leave it at that. Enter. Make sure to save. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is erase. So erase basically just takes an entire segment and deletes it. The equivalent of that would be selecting it and then pressing the delete key. In this case, like I said, it was overlapped, so there were two, so I didn't have to do it twice. But if you have the erase tool, anything and everything that you highlight will be erased. Just like that. Well, you'll select it and then you right click and it will confirm your erase. I actually want those, so I'm going to erase these lines instead. I'm going to erase both of them. Okay, next tool, making sure to save frequently. Okay, so the next tool we're going to go to is the copy tool. It's pretty self-explanatory and its positioning up here is actually meaningful, honestly. So it's right under move, and all copy is it's basically just move, except it keeps the original. Kind of like how you do rotate and you're allowed to keep the original. It's the same thing, but kind of like with move. So let's make a copy. So I want to copy this stuff. I'm going to copy this and put it over here. But there's actually something really cool you should know about these tools I forgot to mention. So you can either click the tool and enter the process of going to things, but each time you use a tool, you have to select something so it knows what you're talking about. So a quick little thing you can know is you can always select what you want to apply the tool to and then click the tool, and it will bypass that first step of asking you to select stuff because you've already selected it. So let's try that. I'll select this stuff and then I'll click copy, and then it'll ask me to specify a base point, just like move. I'll click the center and then I can move it wherever I want to and it'll just keep the original. It's the same thing where you can have it's a polar coordinate, it's a length and an angle from 0 degrees, like the unit circle like we talked about. Now, what are the tools that we can use here? Well, you can use an array and everything. I'm not going to get into that right now because that's a tool that if you see up there in the modify tab, we'll use later. But this should be a quick little shortcut on how to do that from copy. But we're not going to do that. I'm just going to place something right here, and that'll be pretty cool. In fact, though, just because I want to, I'm going to rotate this. For circles, it's kind of weird to get this center point. You kind of have to like coast until it shows up. But I'll do this at -45 degrees. And I'm going to take this and then I will copy it. Click this, right click, recent copy or recent input, then copy. We will click this and we'll go over here and we'll place another one. Easy. We just copied the thing that we just made. Now the next thing we're going to do is the mirror tool, which basically will take any drawing that you have and you'll define a mirror line and it will reflect it and mirror it across that line. So let's say I want to take these and put them up here, both of them. So I will do that. Also remember that you can type in the command bar or just start typing when you're in here. Anything, and you can get the tool from there. So I'll do that, mirror. In fact, I guess I'm going to select this after. Click enter or right click. Specify the first point of the mirror line. So I'm going to click here, right? And if I were to just go here, you'll see it mirror it completely. But I can put this wherever I want. I can make it go crazy. So I can go up here and mirror it in that direction. On a 45-degree line, I can do that. The other 45-degree line down here, I'll completely mirror it like that. You can do whatever. So I'm going to just do this because that'll be very simple. Now this is like copy and rotate, right? It wants to know if we want to keep our source objects. So I want to say, yeah, I do not want to erase it, so no. So let's see. Now we're going to do fillet, and the easiest way to show that is just to do a right angle line. You can make this right angle anyway. If you remember Polyline, we can just go like this, and it'll allow us to make multiple segments. If you have your snaps down here turned on, or your orthographical turned on, which is strictly 90 degrees, you can make one that way. But I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to make a single line, and I'm going to mirror it on a 45-degree line, and that will give us a 90-degree end, and I want to keep the source object. One thing that you'll learn with AutoCAD is that you can do with probably one drawing in like a million ways. It's just however is more comfortable to you. So if you like one over the other, no one's going to stop you from doing it the way that you're comfortable with. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So we have the fillet command, right? Well, you see a little drop down. We're going to go through all three of these, but honestly, it might be better to have a couple more corners because these work for corners and other things. So I'm actually going to do that same command again. I'm going to mirror this around here. And now I have a square. I could have used the rectangle tool, which would have been much faster, but this way you can see how the tools can be used. The fillet tool, basically it will make it'll make a curve around an edge. So if you imagine like a piece of wood, like an edge of wood, it would be like filing it down to a perfect radial arc. So what we're going to do is give it a radius, but in order to know the radius that's appropriate, I'm going to measure this, and we'll figure out what might be a good radius to work with, because it could be different for all kinds of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to show you before that is this tool called the Measure Geometry tool. You can actually find it up here in Utilities as Measure. Be careful though if you're typing it in the command line bar or just free typing, because there was a command that I showed you guys in the first video also called Measure, which honestly doesn't really do much and it's not super awesome. So if you do type Measure, make sure you arrow down to Measure Geometry, or you select Measure Geometry. That Measure Geometry, or under Measure Quick, I just dragged it in here. My cursor is where that plus is, and you can just see a bunch of quick little dimensions about a bunch of things. You can see this in the other parts here. There are different radii, arcs, a bunch of different information that's really helpful to know. But long story short, the length or width of this, since it's a square, is 2.5519. And right now my units are in inches. I'll show you how to change that after we do this tool. But so if that's 2, then let's pick something a bit smaller. Maybe not quite 1, but maybe like 0.5 or 0.75. Yeah, let's do 3/4 of an inch. That would work perfect. That won't be too curved. It won't be a huge curve or super small. So let's do that. Well, okay, let's pick our edges, and wow, nothing happens. That's not good. So the reason that happens is because if you tab down, arrow down, or right click, you can see it's going to ask you a couple questions, or not questions, but you have settings you can change that you need to enter before you can use this tool. So trim, multiple, polyline, undo, that's okay, but the biggest thing I'm going to show you are 2 main functions of this. First is radius. That will ask you a radius, you enter the radius, and then you can select the corners you want to do. You have to select the 2 adjacent meeting lines that create a corner in order to use this tool. So I'll put 0.75, press enter, and then it'll ask us what we want to do. Select, and there you go. We have our first fillet. Basically, if you want to think of it like this, so you click fillet, a quick thing you can do is you can click one line, but you see it says shift select to apply corner. You can actually like reverse fillet and make a corner. That's pretty crazy to be honest, but if you take a look at the difference here, now I'm just doing Control Z and Control Y to go undo and redo, but basically from a corner what it does is it goes in the radius, draws an arc, and then cuts away and trims the rest of it. So it's using tools that are already there. It's just like making extra steps. Chamfer is similar to this, but not quite the same. So what it'll do is it basically, instead of drawing a circular or radial arc, it will draw a straight line between points. Now that can be between distance A and distance B, or distance A and a degree that way. Hey look, I rhymed. Isn't that awesome? So in this case, I want to go maybe this distance. Now, a quick way to measure things is honestly just use line, and just don't actually like make the line, just press escape, but you can get like a dimension there. So I'm going to go 0.5. That'll work pretty nice. Press escape to get rid out of that. So click chamfer. Now, what's important to know is this. The order you click these lines matters, because if you are going to, it'll ask you this. It'll say select your first line, second line, and then your distance and second distance. Those are in the same order. So the first line you click is distance A, and the second line you click is distance B. Same thing goes for when you do the line and then degree. The first thing you click is the line A for a distance. So just keep that in mind. It's easy to be like, what's happening? I don't know. So there are a couple, like I said, there are multiple ways to do this. So let's select the correct way to do it, or the first way that we want to do it. So we'll right click and you'll see all these options, right? We'll do distance first. It'll be based completely on distance. So the first chamfer distance we'll do is what I said, 0.5, and then the second one we'll do 1. Oh geez. 0.5 enter, and then 1 enter, or you can right click the first line and the second line. And you'll see it did exactly what we wanted it to do. Now, so that'll make this kind here. But let's say we wanted to make something a bit different. We could do it with an angle. So we could do chamfer, right click, angle. So it'll say the first length, we'll make that 0.5. And then we'll actually right click to enter, because you can do enter or right click most of the time. And the chamfer angle from this first line here. So it's going to go here and then out. So let's say maybe 40 degrees. Why not? Right click. This is the first line. And here. So now if I was to give some dimensions, let's go to dimension here. Click 1, click the second. If you see, now it's 40 degrees. which is awesome. And if you go to dimensions again and you go to this bottom line and this point, well, actually I have to be a bit more particular than that, I think. This line and this point. Okay, go to an intersection. It's 0.5, what we just put in. So that's great. That's perfect. So now we know how to do some chamfering. Before I go to blend curves, I'm going to make something quick and show you what that polyline function does. So let's say I make two rectangles. I repeat rectangle. I go up here and I make another rectangle, right? So then I'll go ahead and I'll trim from here. I'll trim those. And we'll do the polyline on here. And the polyline, what it's going to use by default, I think, are the two distances, not the distance angle. It might be the last one that you used. I'm honestly not sure. I think it's the last one you used. So, yeah, so you'll see if I was to use that and I do polyline, it selects an entire segment and does it to all of the edges. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, from clockwise, or no, sorry, counterclockwise in the direction of the unit circle angles, it will do line A and then the other one, or actually maybe the other way around. It's kind of finicky and it's not the best thing because rarely do you have to chamfer everything to the same size, but the point is you could do that with these, but you might be wondering, why did it not get this? Well, these are two different segments. So what if we wanted to do it all at the same time? Wouldn't that be pretty cool? So let's do that. Save. There's a tool down here, and we'll get into in a little bit later. I'll go back to it, but it's called join. So basically it takes separated segments and connects them as one whole line. So I'll do that, and now you can see it's one whole line. So now if we do chamfer polyline, it will do all of them at the same time. Okay, the next tool that we'll use is going to be that blend curve. So let's do that. What it does is it basically takes two line segments and it finds a smooth, continuous way to connect them. So let's make two arcs. Actually, what am I doing? Right click, repeat. And we'll do a second one like that. Two crazy weird arcs, right? Not really crazy, but you'll see why it might be a bit crazy. I want to connect this line to this line, to this side of the line. If I wanted to connect it to this side, I would just go, honestly, it'll be like divided in half and anywhere on this side will be there, and so on and so forth. For lines like this, there's generally like an unspoken center, and what direction you're applying it to depends on what side you're clicking on. But, so let's do this. Now, blend curves is what it's called. The options involved are continuity. Now it says tangent and smooth. I don't know why those names are like that, but the biggest difference is, if you remember to how you can make spline lines, you make spline lines by clicking a bunch of separated points and using those as reference to make a curve around them in a weird way. Well, basically tangent just has 3 reference points and smooth has 5, and I'll show you the difference because I'll do one at the top and bottom. So if I do tangent here and here, you'll see it makes this. If I do continuity smooth and I do this and this, oh gosh, it'll try to make the closest line to it. Now let's click on these. This one has only couple points of intersection here, and this one has more. It's not quite 5. I think it's maybe it's not 5. Maybe it might be 3 and 4, or 2 and 4. So this would be 2 in here, and that would be 4 here. The biggest thing here is this will make a more basic line, and this might make a more complicated line. Something smoother than just the abilities of this. So that's what those are. Now, I'm going to show you one more thing with this drawing here, and that'll be this little tool. This means explode. Basically, it takes a continuous joined segment and explodes it into single line segments. So this is all one thing, right? Well, let's click on this or highlight it, whichever you prefer. Actually, by the way, this green will select anything that's touching it, and the blue will select anything that is fully enclosed. So this will only work if I do it like that, not this. But so let's just get the corner here. That'll get that with green, so we don't have to click so far. Click explode, and it has done its job. And now you can see if I highlight this compared to before, we have so many lines. We have individual segments. They're not a whole line. It's not an entire single unit. It is now multiple units. So we go to modify now, and we'll do stretch. Stretch, what it does is it basically, out of the selected things you have, it'll stretch it away from the rest of the drawing. So a good example of this is that base drawing for this that we had before, right? Actually, I'll pull this a bit more. Yeah, don't forget you can click this stuff and you have little grips. They're called grips, where you can grab them and then drag around and edit things and all that. It's really good to know. So we'll trim all of this and get that. I want this to be continuous all together. One big thing, because you can't stretch things that aren't connected, right? Because then you're just moving them. So let's take all of this and recent input join. Okay, so a pretty practical thing is the way that it works is it's similar to move copy, where you have an initial point, final point, and it's connected by a line defined by an angle and a distance. May need to rewatch that. That was a lot of stuff to take in at one point, but we can click this and we can click stretch. It actually won't do anything, it'll just move because everything is being moved. But stretch is cool because it can move a specific part away from the rest of the drawing. You can select this right here. Select that part because they are connected, they're just not one segment. So they're joined officially, but they're not connected. So we'll now stretch, specify a base point, and now you can see it will stretch the segment we have away as much as it can in this weird like fashion. So let's actually take this and not copy it, my bad. Let's do that and rotate it around this point, or no. We will rotate it around this point, and we want to copy it and put it in 180. So we'll do something like this. That might be a bit too large. So let's get the rest of this and move it over here. That'll work. So I actually want to get rid of those, so let me just go ahead and trim. Again, I'm trying to make sure I use these tools so you can see how they can be fully utilized. But now that we have something a bit more complicated, let's try stretching it. So I want to stretch this. So let's select it, go, and then you can see I'm stretching this entire area. Stretch isn't used a whole lot, but it's good to know how it works in case you need to. I guess you're messing around with stuff and it makes sense. You can use it to scale things this way. In the direction of the stuff you've selected, but you can play around with it to fully understand the way it works. So now we'll do scale. Scale's pretty straightforward. I will copy one of these. Actually, before I do that, quick thing, move, rotate, mirror, and copy are really, I think scale 2 are really commonly used of those. So if you were to copy stuff, you can actually right click and they're all right here too. So this program makes things really easy to do because everything is right at your fingertips. So you're basically God in this program. So let's go ahead and copy this. Specify a base point. Don't really care where it is. Just move one up here. So if I want to scale it, basically all scaling does is it takes a base point and scales everything around that. So if I wanted to do that, you can actually right click and it should be here, scale. Also up in modify, you can type it however. Specify base point. So I could just click this and it would just scale like it normally would, but to really show you how it scales in the direction away from the point, I'm going to pick this. So when I do that, you'll see it will keep that point the same and scale everything with reference to that single point. So I'll just make it, and you can, the options involved here are, I don't know why that went away. Let's see. The options involved here, if you were to tap down away from a cursor, is you can copy it so that, like before, you can keep the original and you can use a reference geometry to define it. You can actually toggle between the reference geometry and the input geometry. So if I'm on like a line or something, you can see it just kind of tells me it's already at 0. What's the polar? What can you select? But if you're outside of that specific input of a snap of like orthographic stuff, or what you may see down here for these snap line settings. Okay, for the last time, you'll see it'll do that, or you can input 1. I'm just going to go ahead and click arbitrarily. Here is fine. Oh, it's about double. That's a scale tool. Nothing too crazy. Pretty helpful though. Now the next tool